What I tell people is very simple, and people in America are way ahead of all of you. They know what's going on, because when you say, why don't you go back and think of what people are doing at their kitchen table? I'll tell you what they're doing at their kitchen table. They know that if you spend more than you earn, you lose your butt. And they know that if you spend $1 and borrow 40 cents of it, you must be stupid. And they've got it figured out that this government is stupid. To borrow 40 cents for every buck you spend, forget the charts, forget the GDP, all the rest of it. That's where we are.
I think we face the most predictable economic crisis in history. A lot of us sitting in this room didn't see this last crisis as it came upon us, but this one is really easy to see. The fiscal path we are on today is simply not sustainable. This debt and these deficits that we are incurring on an annual basis are like a cancer, and they are truly going to destroy this country from within unless we have the common sense to do something about it.
I appreciate that both he and Mr. Bowles were willing to take on this task, and I appreciate the results that they've gotten and the way that they've promoted it across the country. It needed to be done. I was one of the co-sponsors of the Conrad Gregg bill and thought that that was essential, and was disappointed when that didn't pass, and was elated when the president decided to do it anyway, and thought that was a good step. I got to say, I was a little disappointed when the president missed the opportunity in the State of the Union speech to say exactly what you've been saying here today, to inform the people of this country of just how desperate the situation is, so that we could take some positive action on it. And I was disappointed when the budget proposal came out, because I think that was another opportunity for him to show exactly what you had been saying and to put some of those things into effect. And the biggest thing he did in there was take the tax expenditures and use them for new programs instead of reducing the corporate debt. The American people have figured it out with your help, and they're getting it clearer and clearer every day. We've got to get Congress to catch up.
Let me just tell you how crazy our situation is today. We have this treaty where we're supposed, if China were to attack Taiwan, we're supposed to support Taiwan. The only problem is we'd have to borrow the money from China in order to do it. You know, this is a real mess we're in today. And we can either take the ostrich theory and put our heads in the sand, or we can decide we're going to step up and do something about it. But I can tell you, bankers aren't going to continue to finance something that they aren't sure they're going to get paid back. And the less sure they are, the more they're going to charge you at first, and then they're going to cut you off. And we're borrowing half of our money from foreign countries.
The former Republican Senator Alan Simpson and the former Clinton White House Chief of Staff Erskine Bowles may forever be remembered for their great idea that was never put into practice. In 2010, President Obama challenged the bipartisan duo to chair a commission to develop policies to bring America back to fiscal sustainability. And they did. Many powerful Washingtonians on both sides of the fence applauded the proposal from the two chairs, but nobody ever did anything about it. And this week, the dangerous carping over the debt limit began anew. Who better to talk about all this than Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles, who are joining me now from North Carolina. Thank you so much for joining me, folks.
It's a pleasure.
Great to be here.
Senator Simpson, you've seen what's been going on these last few months. House actually voted on the Simpson-Bowles proposal, and it went down decisively. Paul Ryan, the leader of the House on fiscal issues, I suppose, said that Simpson-Bowles was the wrong way to go because there weren't enough spending cuts and there were too many tax increases. What was your reaction? That's your party.
Well, I think my party and I have different views on a lot of things. I guess I'm known as a rhino now, which means a Republican in name only, because I guess of social views, perhaps, or common sense would be another one which seems to escape members of our party. Abortion is a horrible thing, but for heaven's sakes, a deeply intimate and personal decision, and men legislators shouldn't even vote on it. Gay, lesbian issues, we're all human beings, we're all God's children. What is this? And for heaven's sakes, you have Grover Norquist wandering the earth in his white robes, saying that if you raise taxes 1 penny, he'll defeat you. He can't murder you. He can't burn your house. The only thing he can do to you as an elected official is defeat you for re-election. And if that means more to you than your country when we need patriots to come out in a situation when we're in extremity, you shouldn't even be in Congress.
But talk about Ryan particularly, because what I'm struck by is the Simpson-Bowles plan calls for an awful lot of spending cuts, and yet those weren't enough.
Well, Erskine can tell you, we don't call for, you can't cut spending your way out of this hole. You can't grow your way out of this hole, and you can't tax your way out of this hole. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, we tell these people. This is madness. If you want to be a purist, go somewhere on a mountaintop and praise the East or something. But if you want to be in politics, you learn to compromise. And you learn to compromise an issue without compromising yourself. Show me a guy who won't compromise, and I'll show you a guy with rock for brains.
Erskine, you're hopeful. You think that that some of the idea is gaining traction, and there's a kind of inevitability. If you're going to do this, there has to be some approach that's pretty close to what you're describing.
Well, Fareed, I believe the markets will force us to. I've spent my life in the markets, as you know, and look at what's happening at the end of the year. We have about $7 trillion worth of economic events that are happening. We have the expiration of the Bush tax cuts. We have the patch that's been placed on the alternative minimum tax that will affect so many middle-class taxpayers. We have the payroll tax deduction that's expiring. We have these senseless, mindless, across-the-board cuts that come from the sequester that comes as a result of the failed super committee. All of those are hitting at once. And the economic effect of those just next year are about 2% of GDP. If we have a negative effect of 2% of GDP, we'll be right back in recession. And you better believe that the people of America will be calling on these members of Congress to do something. So we think something will happen in the lame duck session. We believe it'll probably be a two-step process where we end up setting up a framework with a time frame in order to get something done.
Boy, that's pretty optimistic.
Yeah, and don't forget, it doesn't have to be exactly what the Simpson-Bowles plan has, but it's got to be a balanced plan. You've got to have some small amount of revenue that comes from reforming the tax code, and there's broad agreement that the tax code needs to be reformed. So I believe that you will find, if in fact we can get the right kind of momentum going, I think you'll find strong support. We've been working with 47 members of the Senate, an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, a same kind of group in the House of Representatives, and I believe this group will come together during the lame duck to put forward a plan like this. Now, I don't think the plan itself will be implemented during the lame duck, but I think there will be an agreement that we have to do some kind of balanced plan. If we don't, then I think you will see the markets really take a really adverse look at the country. And I think you'll see us lose another downgrade in our credit, and I think you'll see interest rates pop up, and before long you'll see the availability of credit lessen. So I think we could have a real problem if we don't do something and do something relatively quick.
And you know who will get hurt the worst in that process when interest rates go up and inflation kicks in? The little guy. The one that everybody on their hind legs talks about. We're doing this for the little guy, the most vulnerable, the unfortunate. Well, Merry Christmas. Those guys are going to get eaten when interest rates go up and inflation kicks in.
Gentlemen, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to ask Senator Simpson and Erskine Bowles what they think of President Obama's leadership on this issue, what they think of Mitt Romney, and maybe a few other things as well.
So describe to us the devastation. I mean, what is going to happen if and when, if nothing, if Congress can't do this? You're talking about devastating consequences the markets are going to do. What are they going to do? Just describe a scenario of the disaster.
You're the old businessman. Tell them what'll happen. Then I'll give my jaded report.
Well, your cost of capital just goes out of a roof, and all the projections that we've showing, you know, $1 trillion in interest go to multiples of that. You have hyperinflation. I mean, the picture is not pretty. But when you describe it just in terms that people understand, Admiral Mullen is right. I mean, our national security, you know, its biggest threat is the buildup in this debt, you know, because we won't have the capital, you know, to fund our military. You know, I guarantee as a business guy, you know, if I can't get money to grow my business, I'm out of business. And
so interest on the debt accounts for what then percentage of GDP that you can't use for other purposes?
Well, interest on the debt today is about $200 billion. And just staying as is, doing nothing with very aggressive rates of interest. This is based on the economy growing at over 3.4%, which is faster than any 10-year period in the last 50 years. So it's not like it grows to $1 trillion in just 10 years. And that's keeping interest rates at a very modest level. You know, you can just see what, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% in interest cost does. And pretty soon you have no money left for anything else. And then you have to go through
you think interest rates, I mean, your interest rates are going to rise to what? Are they going to rise to Carter levels? Or
I don't know. Mort, I'd give you an answer. I don't know. You should talk to people in the markets, but you would, because I'm...
No, wait a minute. If you're going to sell this plan, you've got to tell these...
we will, but
people, wait a minute, you've got to describe the disaster in vivid terms, or nobody's going to do it. I mean, to say unsustainable and all these things which we've been hearing for years, I don't think brings to people's attention how bad it's going to be.
It won't. It never will. Never has. I've been around here 32 years one way or another, never been a lobbyist. Let me tell you, it won't be the old slippery slope crap that we read about. It'll be very swift. It'll be very swift and very dramatic, like in Greece or Ireland or Portugal or Spain or wherever. And the difference is that this isn't like it was in my day or 3 years ago. This is a global thing. There's puzzlement going on, there's currency manipulation, there's fun and games for the big boys and the little guys, bonds going sky high. I don't know where this is going, but I tell you, it won't take long. It won't be a year to prepare or two. It'll be like that.
People say, well, what would happen, gosh, if the Chinese started selling our debt? Stop and think if they just stopped buying it. You know, 50% of the debt that we sell today is being sold to foreign countries. You know, that's a big change from previous times. Half of that is being sold to the Chinese. They're going from an export economy to a consumption economy. You know, they're not going to have the need for our capital.
Why haven't the markets reacted at all to any of this, given that this is all...
Because we're the best looking horse in the glue factory right now. And
yeah, I never heard you use that.
It's rubbing off, isn't it?
Yeah. Best looking horse in the glue factory.
We got about 2 minutes left.
Where do I think we are? I'm really worried. I believe the probability is that we're going over the cliff. And I think that would be horrible, and I think it would be devastating to the economy. And it particularly bothers me, especially given the fact that I believe this is the magic moment. And what I mean by that is, God, if we're ever going to get a deal done, now is the time to do it. We've got a second-term Democrat president who has been willing to put entitlements on the table. We've got a Republican speaker who gets it, who's been willing to put revenues on the table. We've got at least half the Senate, an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, who have said, look, we ought to have a balanced plan. And most importantly, you know, to get something done here in town, you know, you got to have a crisis. And we got one. You know, we got a real crisis in this fiscal cliff. And I think it would be insane to breach this fiscal cliff. Yet I think there is only a 1/3 possibility we'll actually get something done before December 31st. I know most of you. I've worked closely with almost all of you on both sides of the aisle. I have great respect for each of you individually, but collectively, I'm worried you're going to fail the country.